I'm not sure. We'll do a little adjusting here. Wait for that to show up. Nice. Trying a little something new here before we get the show started. Loading, loading, loading. There we go. All right, everything looks all right. What's going on, guys? Good morning. Waiting for the extra screen here to load. I'm gonna check it. Chat's not showing up. There we go. Hey, what's going on? Matilda Gothica right there. All right, guys. One of the things that I often get asked about, and it looks like the camera is working just fine, I think. But anything, one of the things I kind of get asked about and what I've heard over the years since day one of doing YouTube, starting like 8 years ago or whatever, still have the same potato cameras and stuff like that going. It's about how to get into comics. And there's been like a lot of conversations over the years with other collectors and YouTubers and stuff like that. And oh, that's funny, Jared. Sorry to startle you, man. But one of the things I've always asked is like, how do you get into comics and stuff? And the conversations, the collectors we've had, and back in the day when I did more shows and things like that. Yeah, I got a haircut, Matilda. I do that every now and then. A lot of people's noticed this time. I must have been looking pretty, I don't know, pretty shaggy last time here, right? But one of the things that is how to start into comics, and then I totally get why some people feel overwhelmed. Comics have been around for over 80 years, and there's a lot out there. And then of course we have the internet going on, where you can do like a little Google search and things like that. And the thing about it is that I think it's one of those hobbies that people seem to overthink. And then there's so many people out here that have done comics for so long, where you have access to people who work in comics, and you see people making videos, or they're in Facebook groups, or on Twitter, they're on Instagram, they're showing their collections. I feel like people feel like they need to have like validation and stuff. And the biggest thing to me that I think when it comes to comic book collecting is that you got to remember that it's a very personal hobby. I mean, the first thing you really need to do just to get into the hobby is pick up a book, open it up, and you're into comics. You're reading the comic book. It's that simple. It's you in the comic. And one of the things that's always amazed me about this is that this comic book came out in 1987, and I can't seem to get away from Booster Gold. And even though this thing came out in 1987, you can read it now 31 years later, and you will have the same experience I had in 1987. And then when we talk about the book, it's like where it's actually a physical comic that you're holding in your hands. It's like a little time capsule. We're still having the same experience, and thousands of people do this with each comic. It's a lot of people really get caught up in how big is my collection, how much do I know, and the thing about it is that it's whatever you're sitting there reading that you like. So the way I ended up getting into comics is I had a house. I've said this all many many times. Um, All right, John Jones. On hearing how you said Lock and Key was, I managed to get all 6 trade paperbacks for a real cheap price, and that's how you got to do it, right there. That's one of the things I want to touch on, and I hope you enjoy Lock and Key. I about bowed out on the first trade, and I'm so glad I didn't. Yeah, Matilda Gothica hears that it is weird. I had trouble reading comics at first. Yeah, expand on that a little bit, Matilda. I might touch on that. But I was 4 years old in this house. Had a stepdad that was really young, a step uncle who I don't know, he might have been a little bit older or something like that. And they had comics all over the place. And I still have some of those comics that I picked up one rainy day on a Sunday when I was 4. And there was a bunch of coverless comics, tore up comics. This is like in 1977. And no cover on them like this. I ended up upgrading over the years to get them. Um, things like that. They were just all over the house. It was horror comics, just all kinds of stuff that was just sitting there, and I was just enthralled. I read and studied those books. Like I said, this is actually one of the first comics I read. And then about 2 years later, because I was reading their magazines that they had horror magazines. I was reading heavy metal. They always had comic books. They would have paper bags from grocery stores full of comics and stuff, right? I ended up buying my first comic when I was 6. And I just kind of just read. I would just grab comics and read them and stuff like that. I understand how people can get overwhelmed these days. When I started in the 70s, I had access to only what was on the stands that month. Nowadays, one store can have 40 years worth of comics. Yeah, you walk in there and there's long boxes all over the place and walls of comics. Hey, Steve's here. Charlton66 is here. What's up? Matilda Gothica, I only read books before, and when I started comics, I was stuck on each page for a bit. I might talk about that in a minute, right? So the way to get into comics, I think, is to just grab a stack. You have such access to them. Don't overthink it and don't put a lot of pressure on yourself. You know, that sounds so simple saying that when you walk in, but I try to understand where people come from, because from day one, whenever I saw a stack of comics, a stack of books, when it was time for those troll orders at school and stuff where you get to order your books, it was nothing but excitement. If I smelled comics, the way this comics smell, that ink, that pulp paper, and things like that, it just jacked me up, man. Good to see you, Steve. Glad you're in there, man. Just found a topic and figured we'd go with it and stuff, right? So I get excited. So the whole idea of being overwhelmed by something that's supposed to be fun kind of escapes me a little bit, and I totally own it and stuff, right? But the few things that I also think that a lot of people could actually do to get a starting point, because I have a whole box here and stuff, man. But during the 80s, and they still do these up into the 2000s and stuff, you have reference material, right? Like I need to pull out more comics in place. In the 80s, DC came out with Who's Who's, right? Several series. Here's Who's Who for the Legion. I've noticed a big resurgence and a lot of new people asking me to do Legion videos. I've seen Legion pop up more and more on Twitter. I've seen, there's like a Brainiac and Supergirl Twitter account that I follow that just cracks me up. Yeah, I read random trades at the library and use the internet to fill me in. That's Cayman X. Yeah, and that's just what I'm saying. To me, I try to understand the overwhelming feeling, because there's so much access to comics with the internet that we didn't have back in the day. We didn't have the pre-internet days. Man, you got a comic, man, and if you ran across 2 or 3 issues and there's an issue missing out there, it could be years before you found it, looking around and digging around and stuff. So you would have these stories in your head, and you would start getting that thrill of the hunt and stuff, right? Anyway, but what I would do is I like just get to know the characters to go through there. You can get these who's and things pretty cheap. Ah, nice, nice. Yeah, but you can get who's really cheap. Um, we had official handbooks of the Marvel Universe. And what these were was basically they had the characters in alphabetical order for per universe. And you could go through here and it'd say their first appearance and give you a rundown of their history, their powers and stuff. And you get on the internet like Cayman X is talking about, and you can kind of fill in the gaps. There's websites out there where you can see entire runs, entire synopses. I used to be really down on Wikipedia because it was bad, but Wikipedia seems to be getting better. And I'm not going to call out so many channels I know that I can tell they jumped on Wikipedia to make a video and do story time. It just cracks me up. I mean, I remember the days when there was channels that did that. They didn't last long, and they were just putting out so much information. And I've seen entire channels where they just read the Wikipedia article and stuff, right? And so see what we have here. And so many things have a comic. Yep. I'm plowing through my collection trying to thin it out. Got it all caught up in cover art, and it's off the chain, out of control in here. Trying to hang on to absolute favorites and let go of the rest. That's Kim out there. I could not believe some things that did have a comic. Matilda Gothica is really, it sounds like she's relatively new to the comic. And sounds like, to me, it sounds like it's licensing material and stuff out there. I'm going to move to trades for stories. Yeah, there's a lot of comics that have come out in the last 10 years. I kind of feel like it'd be better to get them in trade and stuff, because really, honestly, we don't get the key issues like we used to. Comic books are so thin compared to what they used to be that they actually make stories with trade in mind. Like, we're going to do 6 issues, so that just kills the pacing that comics used to have in each comic. You seriously, I mean, it's just amazing. You can get these things. You can look them up online. But it used to be like, especially if you got a Roy Thomas comic, man, one comic book could take 20 minutes to read at one point. It was just filled. Get a Steve Gerber Man Thing, anything by Roy Thomas. They packed that thing in to, and I swear it's like it takes 3 to 6 issues to do what they used to do in one issue. I missed Hulk 237 in 1979 and didn't get it until about 1982. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Matilda is 9 months into the hobby, but Jared is saying that yeah, I missed Hulk 237 in 1979. Didn't get in until about 1982. It's the only issue I missed from 1976 until 1985, and it drove me crazy. Um, when you started collecting or started a new series, did you complete full runs or story arcs only? I grabbed anything I could. I grabbed anything I could because the way that I'm a little bit different is that I read everything when I was a kid. I loved reading, but I didn't realize that I was loving reading, if that makes sense. I just read, and if something didn't grab me, I just moved on to something else. I read The Great Brain, Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. I started reading Elric when I was like 6 years old. Not saying I comprehended everything I read, because I've gone back and read those stories when I'm older, and the stories that were in my head, I actually wished I kind of pinned them down because I've read some things where it was like completely different. But I started as got going. I wanted complete runs. Like Batman and the Outsiders #1. That was the comic series where I was 10 years old and I wanted to find something. You understand, once you got into comics and you saw Marvel, and at my age realizing I missed Marvel by less than by 12 years, because of being born. I grabbed Batman the Outsiders thinking, oh, this is going to be the comic I get off the rack every month for life. You know what I mean? Because there's been comic book series that have lasted 22 years at the time, and I'm not going to get into the DC stuff like Adventure Comics and Action Comics, Detective Comics, the Batman series. I mean, you just had the idea that these books would run forever. So yeah, I just grabbed everything, and then I wanted a complete series, and of course there were story arcs that I just had to get. So yeah, Yesterday Quest and Avengers, that was something that I bought multiple copies of, trying to get the whole thing. It was fantastic. Writers nowadays write for the trades. Yeah, and that's just part of the industry. It's not one of the things I fault them on. I think it's a mistake, but I'm not in the industry and stuff. When it comes to being a collector and a reader, I would, but you also understand now that I've read Cerebus, and I'm up to reading over 200 issues of Cerebus for sure. It's just I can get why they write and trade. He did that. Sim actually kind of did that with the phone books and trades to tell a coherent story, but that's a 300 issue story. Sandman, that was several stories that made a bigger story and stuff. It could be done right. Trades are more cost effective nowadays. Yeah, yeah, definitely. The cost of them. Also, I find trades in. See, that's another thing about how to get started in collecting. You don't have to spend a lot of money on this. You can go to the flea markets. I go to Books a Million and I go to the cheap section, and I find trades from 2.97 to $6. Count Von Strange is here. All right, what's going on? Scott Connor is here. All right. There was no such thing as starting a series in the beginning of the 70s. There were hardly any arcs either. You could jump in anywhere and catch up pretty quickly. And Jared has a really good point there. Because, like I said, I was 10 years old in 1983, and I remember looking for a number one issue to come out. I remember All Star Squadron started with a #1. I mean, if I really sit here and think about it, there were not a lot of #1s. What a lot of people don't understand is that when it comes to, like, we've had a lot of Batman #1s in the last 10 years. Seriously. Right? Well, when Batman the Outsiders came out, they canceled Brave and the Bold, and that took its spot. That was the third Batman #1 ever at that time in 1983 of anything Batman, a #1 of anything Batman at the time. But going back to the 60s and 70s and even up into the 80s and stuff, and I still feel like it went on into the 90s when Marvel started doing their fold out covers. If you really go back and look, and they give you a history of the team and stuff like that. But Stan Lee, to his credit, said that any comic book could be somebody's first comic. So you got to make it accessible. That's why we would have a whole page of recaps. That's gone with the way of the trades. That actually, I think I heard it drove creators crazy having to do that. But it was a business. Stan Lee knew that this could be anybody's first comic. Thus, we had the blurbs on the splash page at the top saying real quick who the character was, or you'd have a whole page of recapping the story. So yeah, that's a loss, something that's lost from comics, and I think that's really hurt it. People say that they want the first print. Yeah, Yeah, first prints are big, and I've seen some second prints of comics that have been worth more than the first print. The Human Fly was the first Marvel series I got to start with a number one. It wasn't the greatest comic, but about the whole series anyway. Oh yeah, and that's the whole deal with. I don't know if Jared and I are connecting here with this one with our memories and stuff like that, but yeah, finding number ones were not that easy back then. I mean, I can sit here and think of the '70s with Man Thing, Nova, Miss Marvel, the whole DC implosion thing. When number ones did come out, the series were lucky to last past 50 issues, if even 30. The Human Fly was a fun but strange series. That's right, man. I was going to say it was actually the Human Fly was actually a real person, a stunt man, and this was a licensed material. I got in. We're flying by here. Count Von Strange. Both of my first comics were bought late in each of the series. Yep. I think the first series I started with was Micronauts, Scott Connor. And Scott, that does not surprise me, man. The Micronauts still has a huge following that I've seen when I go to these little cons and stuff like that. And whenever I find people at antique shops and stuff, I got one in mind right now. Those Micronaut issues get really bought up pretty quick. Going back to the first series, I always wonder if that's a Mike Gold thing or if it's a Micronauts thing. All right, Paulo's here. What's up, guys? I miss the more fast-paced comics of old, like Lee and Jack's Fantastic Four. Lee and Jack's Fantastic Four, to me, may be the first perfect run in comics that's yet to be topped in a way with the world building, the amount of you got the Inhumans, the Frightful Four. You had sci-fi tales, space. They that was it was so rich. It was so rich in there that they still pull for that stuff. They even brought in magic with Agatha Harkness. Magic in a sci-fi comic. To me, the Fantastic Four was never a superhero tale. It was sci-fi. And they did get into and I think this is regular with a lot of comics back then. They probably still do, but they got stuck in the rotating villains. Like Galactus would keep coming back, Annihilus would come back, Inhumans would come back, Silver Surfer would come back. They got a little bit repetitive there, but in between all of that, it was really rich. First comic I read was Ghost Rider 90 series storyline called Betrayals. I think I kind of remember that. I only had yeah. I missed the classic Arnold Drake Doom Patrol. Well, that's the thing with the Arnold Drake Doom Patrol. It's kind of hard that you say. It's funny you say that. I've got phone book edition over here of Arnold Drake's Doom Patrol, and the Doom Patrol thing that gets me is that we're going to have a television show on that streaming DC thing, and I'm going to give it a chance. The Teen Titans show looks like crap. Now we're kind of getting off track here a little bit, but keep the questions coming. But I'm just going to kind of throw this out there. But if you get into comics and stuff, you can join a group like this. If you read these comments, you can talk to other people. There's still a community of comic book collectors out here. They'll share memories and ideas with you, and they'll talk about their stories, and they'll kind of give you an idea of which way to go. Of course, you have things like eBay, My Comic Shop, all sorts of little stores. You can do it online to order some books. And then, I always say support a comic book shop, but they're so few and thin and things like that, if you have one, go visit it. Jump in that 50 cent and dollar box. Groot was originally a villain too. The Inhumans are the bad guys. Wait a minute, I missed something. Uh, Later got issued issue of the death of Superman. Fell in love with Tom Grummett's art. Tom Grummett is a very underrated artist. I would love to know more what that guy does. He was fantastic. Him and Kerry Gamble. I had um, Tom Grummett and Kerry Gamble. For some reason, I put those two together. I read that Fantastic Four got repetitive because Kirby stopped wanting to create new stuff with no ownership or royalties. He saved all his new creations before he went to DC. Yeah, and I completely believe that. It kind of goes with some of the things I know about Kirby. I heard the same thing. But, take OMAC, for instance. If you go to OMAC and look up, I think it's a Kirby collector I have downstairs. I did a history of OMAC like 6 years ago. There's a video out there. But basically, OMAC came from his idea of a Captain America of the future. And he kept the idea because of the way things were going at Marvel. And then he put it out at DC because he had a contract to put out something like 15 pages a week. for comics, and they got rid of the Fourth World series, all the Fourth World series. That he did. You notice it too. I think Kirby's last creation inside Fantastic Four was him and the Enclave, the Hive. Him and the Enclave. Yeah, I used to call them the Hive. I wonder why. Because the Hive's in the Teen Titans. Probably some cross pollination there in my memory. Is Orion by Walt Simonson any good? I love that series. It's not his Thor. It's Love of the New Gods. It's bold. And it still feels like a comic book. I have almost every issue, and I've kind of laid off completing the series reading wise till I get more. They have great backups. It's a fun comic. It's a fun comic. It's not something I would go out and spend a lot of money for by any means. They were not. They were not the villains. It was more of a misunderstanding in the old Fantastic Four. Talking about the Inhumans. Okay, yeah, pretty much anything by Walt Simonson's worth reading. Scott Connor, I agree with that. Have you read 1984, Mr. Haller? Yeah, I read 1984 when I was like 15 or 16. Um, yeah, I also read Animal Farm. The Enclave created a hive to birth him. Thank you, Paulo. I knew I wasn't. I was kind of wondering there. Does 1984 have a comic? Matilda, I would do a comic book search, Google search on that. I really don't know. Getting the rights to that novel and to actually do it, I don't know. I know that there's been movies and things of Animal Farm by Orwell, but that's what I'm saying. You're getting into comics, you have interest, you start noticing that there's all sorts of things out there that people have done everything in comics. They've adapted things you wouldn't believe. You get in there and that's the thrill of the hunt. Now, Matilda, that's what I'm saying. That's the thrill of the hunt. If you think there might be a 1984 comic out there, start doing some digging. You'll be amazed what you might or might not find. If you don't find a 1984 comic, it might turn around and lead you to something even better. So, yeah, you just never know. Okay, I got one of those secret origin books from the library at the School of Spider-Man and the Hulk. At my School of Spider-Man and the Hulk. The aged paper, faded color, and cover made me think of ancient tome of some kind. Very interesting. You pick up something and it's old, and it feels cool to go back and read something like that. I totally get that, Dingo. Him became Adam Warlock later. Yeah. And actually, that was one of the first Fantastic Four comics I remember reading. What was it, issue like 69 or something? It had the white cover with him's cocoon on it. And all the characters kind of, had a white background. And this is back in the day when Kirby freaked me out. I mean, like, I would have to flip over his covers so I didn't have to see him if I wanted to, like, sleep at night and stuff. And that him cover, the one with the cocoon on it, the Fantastic Four cover, I ended up taking crayons and coloring it because it freaked me out. That freaking cocoon just made me gag. I could, like, smell it. It was really weird. Running around a kid in the, in the woods and around creeks and stuff like that, you would find cocoons, real foamy cocoons and all this stuff. I mean, I would actually see this stuff in nature, and then Kirby captured it perfectly. I could feel the squish on it. Then again, there's some things you think would be perfect adapting comics that have never been done. Philip Jose Farmer books, the World of Tears series. I think people need to go back to the pulps. There's a lot of great novel series that I wish somebody would adapt. Tim was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Reading Steranko's history of comics back when I was a kid was like reading about a lost civilization. That's interesting. We become archaeologists. We become archaeologists of comics. That's pretty cool, man. I only have one of those history of Steranko tabloid books. And I remember reading it about 10, 11 years ago. Interesting stuff. And Scott Connor will know exactly what I'm talking about and stuff, but one of the greatest things to see is to find Jim Steranko talking about smacking the shit out of Bob Kane at a convention. Because he was really nice to him at the history of comic books. He couldn't find anybody to say anything nice about Bob Kane. He left it out, and then Bob Kane did something to him. Same here, only have volume 2. I need to see which one I have. I know it's got Captain Marvel front and center. I've been recollecting Silver Age Metal Men comics. Platinum and 10 have become my personal favorite robots. Now, Matthew Rasco, the Metal Men, that's amazing that you're saying that, because the Metal Men is a team that I can never figure out why DC kept putting out and kept going. So it's really cool to see that they have a fan base. Oh man, see, and anyone else wish their parents collected as well when they were kids so we can inherit the future? Yeah, the Bob Kane story. It's a fantastic story. When I was young, we had comics a lot around. Now libraries and Amazon, we had comics a lot around. Now libraries and Amazon is the place to get them. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's when you're new to comics, there's really no excuse to not be digging about it. If you get a passion for it, you can find the comics in the libraries. I remember the first time I saw comic books in a library. I mean, I was just like blown away. I was like, we made it. I like books in good condition, but being beat up makes it feel like it has character and history. Plus, they're cheaper if they're beat up a lot. Dingo, I actually got quoted that somebody liked in one of my videos where I said well loved. In the day and age of saying 9.8, 8.5 points, very good, and all this stuff, I pick up a comic and I look at it and it's beat up and stuff, and I say it's well loved. You know, if I didn't know that was a thing. But yeah, the whole thing about finding a comic, and like I said, I've kept the beat up comics that I read as a kid, and I've upgraded, excuse me, and I've upgraded them. But I would never give up the beat up issues. Matilda found a 1984 manga out there. Manga, I mean, excuse me, a 1984 manga. So somebody has adapted 1984 in a manga comic. There you go. That's what I'm saying, Matilda. How do you get into comics? Find what you love, get in there, start digging, and read it. Ever heard of Phantoma, the first female hero with powers in comics? Phantoma. I've heard a lot of characters with the word phantom in their names, but I kind of want to say I've heard of that, but you know, I've just read a lot of books. I have no idea. If I was in a trivia contest, I would not be able to say who the first female hero with powers was. So I'll pass on that, Carmen. When I was a kid, the library had some of those early compilations like Bring on the Bad Guys. Bring on the Bad Guys, Sons of Origins of Marvel Comics, Sons of Origin of Marvel Comics. Never laid out, you couldn't find them. And I remember seeing the ads for those and had no idea where to go buy them when I was a kid. I've seen some Phantoma art. That thing is messed up. See, here we are talking about how you get into comics. We got people talking about it. Now I want to go look up Phantoma. You never quit finding things in comics once you get into it. Once you find that niche and that hook or whatever you're into, it becomes easier. Do you think Marvel will ever reverse the no smoking rule? Probably not. Probably not. I can see them doing a rating system where the characters are allowed to smoke, but in their everyday comics, and really, as somebody who grew up on watching Nick Fury and Ben Grimm smoke their cigars and things like that, I get why people miss it and stuff like that. But you know, what would a Frank Miller comic be without some character lighting up? Yeah, guys, I want to be talking but keep talking here. This thing is flying by. You guys are awesome. But the thing about the smoking thing is that the smoking served the story. I think that's sad that we're missing that. When Frank Miller was doing Daredevil, he's going to bring over Kingpin. John Burns said, here's what you do. You do a panel of the classic Kingpin. Then you have the Kingpin light up, and you do your black and white Frank Miller thing. And when that lighter goes out and he's puffing on that cigar, he's yours. So that was a transition using storytelling with a lighter to bring Kingpin from a Spider-Man villain to a Frank Miller Daredevil villain. So it's kind of bad that we've lost one tool to tell stories with. But, you know, if they really wanted characters to smoke, they could just do a rating system or something or put a warning on it. I don't think it's really that important to a certain extent. Like I said, seeing Nick Fury with us when the Nick Fury Marvel Legends toy came out in the early 2000s or whenever it was like that. If you looked at the figure real close, they molded it to where Nick Fury's mouth was open on one side. That was so you can get some clay and make a cigar to stick in there if you were in the know. Okay, Constantine must smoke. All right, turn around. Yeah, Constantine's smoking has become pinnacle to the character, and they actually had a great Garth Ennis story where they took the consequences of smoking and showed that you do get cancer. I mean, yeah, that's what I mean. It's you can't take a character like Constantine and not have him smoke. It's you have to read Constantine to get that. It's not defending smoking; it's serving the story and the character. Okay. My grandfather got me into comics and his collections of Challenger Unknown and Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing was one of the books that got me in there. Issue number 2, where we met the Unmen with the brain, the little head with the hand. I've spoke about him many times. Freaked me out and loved it at the same time. Platinum for a Robot was one of the hottest females in the 60s. I think my middleman, honestly, I'm not saying I may retract this, but I really don't think I read anything by the Metal Men until I saw them in Crisis on Infinite Earths. And I have a few issues here with Walt Simonson did in the 70s. Constantine's smoking was a symbol of his self destructive nature. And that's what I mean. It serves the story and the character. Jared Osborne put Constantine smoking right there. It's not advocating smoking. It's not telling people to smoke. It's Constantine do it. We're watching a character. Why does he smoke? What's pinnacle about it? We got this great story about it, and it shows he's just self-destructive. He knows the consequences, and he keeps doing it. Once you get into comics, find interviews with the creators that you like. Find out who their influences were. Explore that material. Grow from there. Do your homework. It snowballs. Absolutely, Scott. Absolutely. Uh, as you start digging into it, one of the things, yeah, people are jumping over there. One of the things that happens with comics is that I read the entire comic. You open up the comic, you got the cover. You open it up, advertisements, or you might, hey, if it's an 80-page giant, 100-page giant, you get a table of contents. And then you might have a splash page, two splash pages, the advertisements, the gutters, a double splash page. I mean, I loved all of it. And then you might find editorials in the back, or you might find little interviews. And then you have magazines out there that you can go back and find amazing heroes, wizards, all comic scene, all kinds of things with interviews from them. Alan Moore, I started reading a book called Harvey. I had an issue or two in the 70s, and it's a little fat, round guy with magic lollipops with the power of God. He came out in the 60s. And it's because of reading what these guys do. Another way to collect once you get into it is John Byrne had the Super Scroll. So he had the Super Scroll in Fantastic Four. He did some things with him. He continued the Super Scroll story into Alpha Flight, and then he continued that same story into Namor. So these characters, some of these times, these writers will grab a character, and you'll actually have a whole story going through 3 or 4 series they do over years. I mean, if you really jump in there, we'll get into it. Herbie the Flying Saucer. I gotta go get it. I mean, he's got a bowl cut, glasses, wears a white shirt. You know, women seem to love him. And then when he goes full superhero, he wears red long underwear, and he puts a plunger on his head. The beanie, yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's a whole. The whole thing about it is that as a hobby, it's something that's supposed to be fun. You're supposed to be like doing it. Once you find something that catches your interest, you guys have all. You have the freaking internet out there and all these places to buy things. Where back in the day, it was a dig and a hunt, and it could be years before you found what you were looking for. Oh, yeah, yeah. That's what I mean. It takes you all kind. Comics will take you all kinds of places. You end up following. A lot of people don't really follow characters; they'll follow a writer. Believe it or not. Then there's people who collect in ways where the most fascinating collectors out there, and I haven't ran into one in a couple years, but in a span of 20 years, I probably ran into about 30 of these guys. There are people who only collect Supergirl. That's all they did. They just collected Supergirl. The Supergirl comics they were crazy for. And now that we have a Supergirl TV show and all this stuff, I'm kind of wondering how they're feeling if they're out there. Yeah, but they didn't collect any of the comics. The Supergirl, you'll end up finding things you like that you may just kind of collect. What had pre-internet? See, what we had pre-internet was magazines like Comics Buyer's Guide. Yeah, and even those were hard to find. I had to get a comic prior's guide. I had to find an actual bookstore that carried magazines you just didn't find at your local Imagine Mart. CVG rocked, it did. And there was a guy, man. Oh man, Commander Benson. I was talking to a guy named Commander Benson online, and come to find out he was a writer for Comics Buyer Guide. I had no idea. Will answer my question, Mister HY. I didn't see the question. That's for me. Steve, you had many letters printed in CBG. I totally believe that, man. I totally am right there, not surprised. I'm trying to think. I think I didn't get a. I'm not gonna get into that. Yeah, uh, the thing seems the thing seems right. Seeing him in a chair with a cigar, beer, and reading the sports page before some bad guy interrupts. It's part of his character, a real tough guy who's a softie. Yeah, he was a man of his era. Thing was from the streets back then with little gangs and stuff. Loved Thor when I was a teen. Bridget myself to tabletop RPG. Know any good Elseworld stories that aren't Batman Superman centered? Actually, I got two, three boxes around here and stuff. Elseworld stories that aren't. Well, I keep popping up with some, then I find out that Superman does fit in there somewhere. So right now, you take out Superman, Batman. Not really. Nothing's really coming to mind. I could randomly say something here out of nowhere, but I've got, I'm getting a bunch of Superman, Batman stories going through my head when it comes to Elseworlds. Uh, oh yeah, yeah. The thing about Matilda was talking about reading comics at first. Reading comics for people, I've heard them say they can't follow them, so they get down. It's sequential art. You go left to right and on down. Hawk World, yep. Golden Age. Thanks, guys. Justice Riders. Yeah, yeah. The Golden Age is probably my favorite Elseworld story. If I have to take out Batman and Superman, but when it comes to people, it's such a whole new way of reading that people are used to. They usually read a book. They read magazines. They might read, a kid's book that might be prose, like it's got some art over here, but all the narrative is down here. And when you get into a comic, it's one of the few mediums where it lights up both sides of your brain. You got one side that actually does the reading for you, and then you got one side of your brain that's taking in the art, and they're supposed to mesh. Now, I never had a problem following that. There's also in my opinion, a lost psychology to comics. But somebody like Jack Kirby and Buscema and a few guys, Joe Kubert, they figured out how to make your eye follow the art to where you knew which panels to go to. They would have a character flying towards like, the bottom of a corner of a panel, and that's how you knew to jump to the next one. They actually would have a flow in their art that would carry your eye across a page. One of my big rules for critiquing a comic and saying that it's a great comic is if I can follow the comic without reading the words. If I can follow a story or get a story in my head and my eye flows across that art and I know exactly what's going on, you have an establishing shot. You have different angles that kind of bring intensity to a scene. If I get to that last panel on the page and it makes me want to jump up to the other page, story wise, that's a great book. Just say Delivery Files. It's a follow up to the Unholy Trio. That was one of the ones that popped in my head, Paulo, but it had Batman in it. That's why I didn't say it. Some artists are just bad storytellers. Exactly. What happens to Johnny Thunder and his genie in Golden Age always made me cry. Golden Age is so powerful that I consider that to have the number one fight scene ever in issue number four. Paul Smith, that did the art, was a self-taught artist who ended up going into animation, in comics and animation and stuff like that. And there's nobody else that could have made that fight scene. It was awesome. Darwin Cook fits that criteria. Yep. What we got here? Darwin Cook was a genius. Darwin Cook is one of those guys that I absolutely own how I felt about him at the beginning. And I liked how it was through merit and reading his work and finding out more about him that made me realize he was a genius after just a week of finding his stuff. I thought he was a Bruce Timm clone. Then I read his stuff and I found out he actually worked on Batman Beyond and some of that Timmverse stuff and things like that. Then I read about how much research he does into his books and how he loves comics and read interviews with him. And I was just like, the man's genius. It's one of those things where I was just blown away by Darwin Cook. Now seeing people draw stuff on live streams that open my eyes to pencils, inks, coloring. YouTube is awesome. Yeah, it kind of. I know what you're saying. Like I don't know if this is going to show up. Here's something I did because of. This is something I did just playing around from seeing a few YouTube videos and stuff. It kind of sparked my interest in getting back into it. This is a year old. I've got some other stuff around here, but this is just something I did as an exercise to warm up. Just had a good time with it. Slam Brady or Bibbo? Oh, Bibbo. Bibbo every damn time. Slam Brady popped up in, Slam Brady is one of those characters that's in the right place at the right time with the right creators. Slam Brady was in Action Comics number one. He showed up with the first appearance of Superman. He wasn't in the Superman story, but yeah. And I'm not a real big fan of Bibbo or Bradley, excuse me, Slam Bradley or Bibbo there. But if I had to pick one, to be Bibbo. You know, Superman's biggest fan there. All right. Man, I got a lot of messages being retracted. I'm not sure what's going on. Cheech Wizard or Ralph Snart? Cheech Wizard, of course. Cheech Wizard, you know, Von Bodie. Carlo, are you having problems with your internet or something? Every message you get's being retracted, and I'm not sure why. I can't draw on some paper. I can't draw on simple paper anymore. Okay, what are you drawing on, Matilda? All right, guys. Let's see. What do we have here? I have no idea how long I've been on this time. We'll do a few more questions and stuff. Let's see what we get on here. But when it comes to like getting into comics and stuff like that, the biggest thing is don't get overwhelmed. Have some fun with it. Look up these creators. Look up characters if you get into them and things like that. Special paper. Gotcha. And just don't be overwhelmed to find what you like. I mean, how do you get into comics? You pick one up and you open it up and you read it. And you go from there and you play around. Just get you a big stack. Take a chance. Take $5, hit some 50-cent bins or something. Maybe $1 bins. Just get what catches your eye. And there's all kinds of lists out there. I mean, if you want to go heavy duty, like in top 10 comics and stuff, there's plenty out there. Oh, mistakes in typing, Carlos. Awesome. Okay. Actually, Slam actually showed up in Detective Comics #1. Gotcha. Gotcha. No problem. No problem at all. I do not mind being corrected at all. I'm not one of those people. There's really not a lot of ego about it. I just hate when I turn out to. I feel like a dick when I kind of correct people and stuff, but I can't stand misinformation being put out there when it comes to comics, because any YouTube video on comics could be somebody's first video. You don't want to steer them wrong. I can draw half of the Doom Patrol, but Danny the Street is very difficult. Well, you know, if you can draw a gun shop with curtains and, you know, some really little coasters and things around there and stuff like that, you know, more power to you, man. Alternative has cheap stuff to try. Yeah, actually, I just had a PDF sent to me. I can't remember what it is. I may do a video on it. But one of the books that Alterna has coming out, all you had to do was sub the guy. No, you had to DM the guy on Twitter, and he sent you a free PDF of his #1. And it's a book from Alterna. Tim, which titles do you find the most exciting being published right now? Right now, I'm still big on Hillbilly. The stuff that I'm finding that juices me up isn't really something that like I would push on other people. Hillbilly by Eric Powell, I think, is one of the best books being put out there, but I think he killed the momentum with that book by being so late. And now we're starting on a mini series. It was 12 years. So for me, the exciting thing, The Terrifics was pretty good, but I've kind of soured on Jeff Lemire a little bit. The Terrifics, I think, is a fun book. So The Terrifics from DC and Hillbilly. I want to say Doomsday Clock, but we'll see where this goes, you know. I'm looking forward to the Grant Morrison Green Lantern book, just because it's Morrison, and I can't wait to see what he does with Green Lantern, be it good or bad. When I first started comics, I loved characters with other people powers: Amazo, Super Skrull, Adaptoid, Mimic. Oh, very good, very good. The Super Adaptoid blew my mind. And there's one more that popped up in Green Arrow and Green Lantern. He had the head of Batman, the legs of the Flash. He had bat wings that were supposed to mimic the. He had a black chest with a Wonder Woman W going across it. And when he shot his hand, it reminded me of an old Shogun Warrior, but his hand would actually detach and there'd be a wire to it. He was like this alien that was in space and had a nest, and I think Green Air Lantern or something flew past him to. Oh God, I wish I could remember his name. I never even saw him in a Who's Who, but he was an interesting character. He had 2 or 3. I might throw up a few things. My favorite right now is Hillbilly. Awesome. Ordered a ton. Really good looking stuff. Alternative Comics is really getting some momentum. See you later, Jared. I'm not going to be on here much longer. Here are the, are there any blaxploitation comics other than the initial Luke Cage run? Murdoch the Pooch, I've heard of a few books popping up somewhere over the last 10 years that were sort of like playing around with the blaxploitation stuff. Like, you know, it was tongue in cheek and stuff. Don't know what they were. I don't really kind of follow that stuff. Even though I love my 70s, my you know. Okay, guys, what we got here? There are, but not for mainstream comp publishers. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. All right, guys. Like, what we got here? Oh, people are still commenting. We'll go as long as you guys want. A couple years ago, I bought the comic book with Shaft's origin. Well, I would have to play the Shaft movie theme while I read a Shaft comic. It just would not feel the same. Replicon, very good. Current, yep, that's him. That's him, man. You brought me back. You brought me way back remembering that character. I really did not want to have to start digging through my comics to find his name. That would totally would have took up my day. I do get obsessed with some of this stuff. Are we going to get a Halloween special this year from Red Vitamin Blue? Sure, man. What do you want to see? You want to see comics? You want to see movies? You want to see all of that stuff? Sure, we'll do a Halloween special themed show this year. I'm actually going to try to hit a Rocky Horror Picture Show this year. I've already found 2 or 3 around here. You may get me all dressed up as Riff Raff. I go as Riff Raff or Eddie when I go. So yeah, if you want that Red Vitamin Blue, you just tell me what you're looking for in that thing, and I'll do it. I read Henry Man of Steel. It was cool. Okay. Good luck, Matthew, on your art project in college. Good luck with everybody. Plan on reading some Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi was awesome, man. And those advertisements that Mike Zeck did in the back of the comics to get you to buy them and stuff like that were awesome. I don't think I've read Shang-Chi since about 1984, seriously, before I buy the omnibus. Yeah, yeah. We have someone from Brazil out there. How you doing, Adriano? Adriano. I think that's how you pronounce that. All right, guys. We have 25 people watching. That is great numbers for this. It's a rainy Sunday, so you guys know that always makes me think about comics. So I may jump back on here a little bit later. Uh, yeah, Marvel Essentials are really nice to read old stuff in black and white. I think they're good as advertisement. Now there were magazines that were black and white, which I think Marvel Essentials should really tap into. Like Dark Horse really jumped on the Savage Sword of Conan phone books, which are essentially essentials. You know, horror stuff I don't mind reading in black and white for some reason. But superhero stuff, I think it's good just to have if you want to complete a story or just get them on the cheap. I tend to buy 10 issues or read some Larry books before I buy. Yeah, yeah, that's what I mean. Sampling stuff before you commit to really spending money on them. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, old horror stuff works well in being black and white. Absolutely. The House of Mystery um, books that I have over here, the little like phone book editions. Um, yeah, the showcase editions and stuff works really well. And I loved the Savage Swords of Conan magazine. I have the Destroyer, Remo Williams, which is in black and white. But you got to have a really strong inker on there to really enjoy black and white, in my opinion. All right, see you later, Matilda. I should replace my essentials with the new Epic collections. I know I'm black and white, but if I can have them color, I'd rather. Absolutely. Now, Savage Swords are going to be reprinted next year. I have my Dark Horse reprints of that. I'm good. I'm not going to buy them again. I'm not really big on giving Marvel money right now. I'm just not. I mean, it's sad that it's come to this. Now I'm one of the few people like Bone. Jeff Smith's Bone starts out. It's in black and white. People love it in black and white. I'm one of the people that actually likes the Scholastic reprints where they're in color. I mean, I know that's completely blasphemous to Bone fans, but I do prefer my Bone in cover color, and that's all I'm going to talk about my Bone. It's I don't know y'all well enough. Bone works well either way. Yeah, if you know how to use it, then I don't. All right, guys, awesome. Catch you guys later. May do another stream. Thanks for checking in. And be excellent to each other. Like, sub, subscribe, share this thing, and definitely hit that bell because it's been raining, I think, of comics, and that's what it does. Last one, I was ecstatic when I found out that the new Teen Titan collection from Amazon. Later, Paulo. Oh, the new Teen Titans stuff. Yeah, I might talk about 80s teams or something in my next stream. Later, guys.